This last session, we're gonna dive into recognition, and we're gonna talk through how to create that sort of that virtuous cycle of employee recognition. Talk about why employee recognition matters, and just look a little bit deeper into some of the small and the big things that you can do or encourage your employees and your managers to do to make recognition a real thing at your organization. So we've got 30 minutes for this session. Remember, we really want to make this an interactive session, so please do insert questions as we go, and I'll certainly bring them up with our next speaker. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce that speaker to the stage. It's Mary Jo Ogren, head of talent at Graham Allen Partners. Mary Jo, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us for this last session.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kick off with a pretty high level question. Why is recognition one of your top priorities, and why should it be a top priority for organizations?
Sure. I think that obviously at a higher level it's important to us because it's aligned with our values, right? So we at all of our companies, I work at an investment firm and all of our companies focus on growth, relationships, integrity and passion. And relationships are at the center of everything we do. And our CEO, who played football for the legendary coach Lou Holtz, always says what Coach Holtz says, which is do right, do the best you can, and treat other people how you want to be treated. So for one thing, it's just that we feel like it's the right thing to do, right? I think the second is that, and we'll talk about this later, but there's a real business case for recognition being important because the better we treat our teams, the better our teams function, the more productive, the better they treat our clients. And so recognition has been um, important both on this philosophical level, but also this really practical level of us wanting to be successful and knowing that we have to make sure our team feels recognized in a sense of belonging to accomplish our goals.
So let's go a little bit deeper on that, on one of those last elements there. What do you feel is kind of the business impact of recognition at your organization?
Yeah. I think that there's a couple key things for us. One, the majority of the companies in our family that we work with are tech companies, and retention is a huge issue. So, recruiting top talent, especially in engineering and data science and IT infrastructure, and then retaining that talent is really critical. And I believe that recognition and creating this sense of belonging is one of the top things we can do. I think that certainly, salary and benefits and all those things matter, but I really think it's how people feel about your organization that determines whether they join and whether they stay. And so, we have seen just a huge business impact because of that. I think so. There's retention. There's also, happy team members. We call our employees team members. Happy team members treat our clients better, right? Are more excited about work, and that comes through. So we see that in the way our clients perceive what we do. I would say another business impact is that we've done several acquisitions and integrations, and recognition is like our secret formula for welcoming new teams, right? So when we acquire new companies and we fold them into the family, recognition is like something we focus hugely on as a way to help teams integrate. So that's been another big benefit of recognition for us.
That makes sense. And to talk to me through like how I mean maybe philosophically or from a frameworks perspective, how can organizations think about recognition from a tactical standpoint? What are the ways that they can think about it?
So I think there's a couple things I would say. One thing, just in general about recognition, I think, is that it's not rocket science. Like, I don't have any big secrets. I haven't read a million books on recognition. Like, our whole philosophy in our people ops department is just thinking of ways to literally let our team know we care about them, the same way we would let our friends and family know we care about them. And I often I was a teacher, a high school teacher before I went into people ops and HR 15 years ago. And so many of the ways that I treated students, right? Treating them as individuals, doing things to make them feel recognized and heard and seen are the same kind of things that we do here. And I think that when you're thinking about recognition, it's important to think about like how do you individualize it? How do you keep it simple? I think you and I've talked about before, there's this book called The Five Workplace Love Languages.
Hmm.
It's this workplace take on the book, The Five Love Languages. And they talk about that in an office or a company, people appreciate different kinds of recognition. There are some people that really all they care about is financial. They want a bonus, they want a, higher salary. There's other people that want words of affirmation. So they want you just to tell them they're doing a good job. There are some people that want quality time. And so that's the other thing I think about with recognition that goes back to my teaching days, which is how do you individualize it? How do you
Hmm.
keep it varied so that you hit different styles for different people? But the number one lesson is just I think it can be simple. I don't think it has to be complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're, I just like the idea of thinking about it individually, because everybody does, they want to receive recognition in different ways,
Mhm.
right? And they both in their
Absolutely.
personal life and in their professional life. So with that said, talk me through some of the recognition tactics that you've used at Analytics.
Sure. So I would say one thing is that we try to keep it varied so that we do hit those different styles and different things people appreciate. And so there are some things that most people know about. For example, we use Good Vibes, which we were a beta partner for Officevibe. I don't know if everyone on this call's got Officevibe, but it's a tool in our engagement platform that people can send to different people comments and kudos and thanks. And we have a really high percentage of people that use that. We also have a Teams channel. So within Microsoft Teams that we call OnStars, which is like a play on our name Analytics, and people can constantly be doing shout outs to each other. So in those cases, we're trying to hit the words of affirmation, right? We're trying to get people to verbally recognize someone else. We also, though, know that some people like even more public recognition. So when we have town halls, we always call out different teams and different teams, not just like our engineering teams, but teams that may be a little in the background, like finance or marketing. And we really spread around the way we recognize teams. We also do a lot of um, recognition that has to do with moments. So I was listening this morning to the first session today, which was the chief people officer of Workleap, and she said something that I had never thought about this way, but is so much how we operate. She said something to the effect of, you never forget who was at your parents' funeral, and you never forget who was there with you when you had a baby. And we work very hard to be there when people have life moments that are either difficult or joyful. So every time a family member passes away, we send flowers from Analytics. Every time a baby is born, we send baby gifts from Analytics. Anytime someone's getting married, we recognize that. Anytime someone has an illness, right? We're sending like we do DoorDash gift cards or something so that when they get home from the hospital, they can order dinner. We try to be really engaged in the moments when people need it the most. And that doesn't mean we always get it right, but it definitely means we try to be there for those moments. Um, Other strategies, we try to do fun things. Like we're a tech company, so Pi Day is a big thing around here. Like the 14th of March, we have this. I didn't even know what Pi Day was before I worked at a tech company, I have to tell you. But so we have like the spread of pies, and we do, coffee carts, and we do like pizza day. So we do all the typical sort of recognition stuff, right? Those kind of things. And then we do things like scratch off cards where we hand out these scratch off lottery cards that have like extra PTO time or free gear or whatever. I mean, we're always trying to have this well-rounded recognition program that's ongoing, that has lots of different strategies, and we're always looking for even more ways to do it.
One thing I just kind of off the beaten path of our questions that we talked about, but one of the things that's come up through whether we're talking about performance management, learning and development, onboarding, is the impact that managers have on the employee experience. And I would imagine that that's quite true for recognition as well. How can organizations, how can people leaders encourage their people leaders to embed recognition as part of their approach to management?
That's a great question, something we're working on right now. So, first, I would say we believe that if you measure it, it gets better. And we measure our managers' recognition scores on Office Vibe. So, we have Office Vibe broken into teams. We look at the data. We say to managers, hey, like you're doing great on recognition. We give them lots of positive feedback if they are. If they're not, we meet with them and give them ideas for how to better recognize their team. So, again, we're using data to drive how we coach our managers. But one thing we have found is that, and this is just the truth, recognition has been very people ops driven so far. And while we coach our managers, I don't know that we have empowered them enough yet. So we're doing a whole new initiative where we're taking a budget that's getting broken out by manager to do some of their own recognition activities. So we've always had one-off, a manager buys pizza or a manager, does a nice thing, but now we're saying to our managers, hey, here's actual dollars for you to use just for recognition of your team. It might mean that you have the team for a lunch. It might mean that you send someone a book you think that they want to read. We're going to try to empower managers to have more control over some of that recognition. So we are excited. We're rolling that out in July. It's been some work to figure out, but I would say that's one thing. And again, we've done the coaching, we've done all that, but we're going to try actually like putting our money where our mouth is and giving our managers more control over that.
That's great. A question that just came in, I think it's a really good one. A big shout out from the person asking the question for love languages, which I felt like I felt the same way when you brought that up when we were talking about having this conversation. But what in your experience, what's the most common recognition love language that you've seen in your time as a people leader?
Wow. I think it's probably words of affirmation or quality time. I think that people are just floored when someone tells them how proud they are of them and what great work they're doing and what it means to have them on the team. And it is simple and it is free. And I think it just even we do it all the time and we don't do it enough. Like I don't think you can do it too much. I think that especially for people that are under the radar, right? So
Hmm.
we have 250 people at Analytics, and maybe 40 of them are always in the spotlight and always doing well. And then there's other people that don't hear that as much. And so I think words of affirmation, but I also think quality time. So like our president and our CEO will do like focus groups with people or have dinner with people or invite certain people to an event. And it is amazing to see how team members really soak up the quality time with our leadership team or even with each other. So I think those are both two really important. I have seen tangible benefits like money be the least impactful. We do bonuses every year, and to be honest, like people just sort of, in my opinion, have come to expect them. It's just sort of part of the routine, and I don't personally see the big impact from that like I do of telling someone what an amazing job they're doing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much like the good vibes thing. I mean, obviously we use it here at our company, but there's something I don't know. There's something really special about like I get the notification that says, "Hey, you've got a new good vibe," and it opens up, and it's just this. It's somebody has taken the time to write something about your work, about what you're doing, and just it especially in like kind of a remote or a hybrid setting.
Yes.
That might have just been they would have just stopped by my desk previously, but now it's like that same kind of stop by, but it's always recorded too, and so it's a kind of like a nice
Yes.
thing to be able to look back on.
Yeah, and we have found a couple things with good vibes is that one, when we did our performance reviews this year, we asked people to reflect on how they impacted their team members, what contributions they had. 80% of our people had cut and pasted their good vibes into their review. It made me so happy. It was like they had this documentation right at their fingertips of how they had impacted their teammates. And it was so great to see them using that and referring to that. And then I would also say my tip as a people ops leader is you can't just roll out good vibes and never talk about it again to get people to
Mhm.
understand how important it is. We are constantly saying, hey, send a good vibe, blah, blah, blah. And we're looking at metrics. So I can look at the report and see that one manager has sent like 12 good vibes in the past month. I write to that manager and say, "Oh my gosh, I saw the good vibes. That's so great. Your team must be so excited." So we're always trying to encourage the behavior we want to incentivize. So I think if there's a company that uses good vibes and maybe isn't getting as much traction, you have to talk about it. You have to enforce like how important it is. And then I think people use it even more and then it just keeps snowballing.
I also just like I love the meta nature of recognizing recognition, because then it's like, again, it's like the person who's recognizing feels that much more inclined to continue to recognize because they say, oh my gosh,
Yes.
my organization recognized it. So speaking of virtuous cycles, I think that that's a
Yes,
really good example of
that's
one.
right.
Just another question that came in, and we'll jump back in. But unless there's more questions, please keep the questions coming in.
Yeah.
But one thing that you had talked about previously was keeping up with those moments, and apt obviously for a moments that matter session. But how do you keep up
Oh,
with those moments?
it gets harder and harder as we get bigger. We started with 3 people and we have 250 now at Analytics. So one of the things I do is I really coach my managers, and I do this presentation every probably 6 months to a year, manager training, and I say, "Look, if you hear of anything going on with your people, you have to let me know. Not because I'm nosy, not because I don't have anything better to do, but because we want to stay tuned in to supporting people during moments." And so our managers know if someone's in the hospital, let Mary Jo know right away. If someone is announces they're having a baby, now I would eventually know about the baby because they're going to apply for leave, but our managers are coached to kind of be letting me know what's going on as it's going on. Now, I also am very close to a lot of our teams, so I tend to hear things, but you have to rely on your managers um, to kind of keep you in the loop because you could really miss that moment. We had someone graduate from college about a month ago, and a team member wrote to me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you know, but Lee's about to get her degree, and she's been working out for 4 years." So, because I heard about that, and the person knew to tell me, we were able to make a big deal about it. But it has to be the managers for it to scale, or it gets too hard for people ops to know what's going on.
Is there a favorite recognition moment that you've experienced, whether something that's come to you or you've seen somebody go to somebody else, that like really stands out?
Um, I remember during COVID, we were all remote. It was a really scary time. And our president, we had a town hall, all of us, and he said a special thank you to someone on our team who was a service desk tech. I'm sorry, service desk engineer. And he pointed out that he'd had perfect scores on every client survey. And he wrote to me afterwards and he said, "Hey, did we record that Zoom?" I said, "Yeah, we did record it." So I sent him the link, and the next day he told me that he showed his 16-year-old son, and his 16-year-old son walked up to him and hugged him and was crying and said, "I'm so proud of you, Dad." And that is my best recognition memory, that one of our people was able to show their son, and like and what the person told me was, the kid's 16, right? He never hugs me. He doesn't really say he's proud of me, but like showing his son, and his wife was there too. I love that. I love when our recognition can help our team members feel really good to their friends and family. And that's my favorite recognition moment, I think.
Oh, I love that. That's really nice.
Mhm.
So one of the last questions that we have is measurement. Like how do you measure recognition as a driver of business impact, but also just the success of your recognition initiatives? Because obviously you're doing
Yeah.
like kind of individual campaign style approaches to recognition, because you have to drive the awareness, you have to drive the adoption of it. Um, Maybe that's a separate question, but then how do you measure the success?
Yeah. So when we started Office Vibe, I think it was roughly 2018, 2019. I thought we were doing great at recognition, and the scores did not show that. When I got my first Office Vibe scores, recognition was one of our lowest areas, and I was very upset about that. But that led us to start tracking initiatives and see what was moving the needle. And now we have a really high recognition score because we're very intentional about it. But we track it by looking at the data, right? So we have our Office Vibe account has recognition, and it's broken into, so we break people into teams, locations, job types. We have all these different metrics. So I can use the data from Office Vibe of how we're doing in recognition to spot challenging areas right away. So we very much are looking to see where we have a problem. So
Mm.
it it could be that we're kind of low with a recent acquisition, like we folded in a company and they're not feeling the love from us, right? That's a big signal to us that we need to do something differently. It could be a location, but so that's how we use data to really track, and then we do intentional things, right? We roll out some kind of new initiative, and we track to see if the score's going up.
Yeah.
Um, So we're a data company. We try to use data, and Office Vibe lets us segment people so that we really can hone in. And then we hold our managers accountable. Like for our bonus program, our managers and our executive leaders are all responsible for the Office Vibe scores for their team, and recognition is one of those scores. The truth is, we think again, if we want to incentivize work and recognition, we build it into performance expectations for
Yeah.
managers, not for team members.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Um, Kind of going back to the start of that question, because I'm just sort of curious on this. Like, if you are building and launching a new recognition program, just walk me through the steps you take and maybe some of the recommendations you have to essentially market that new program that you're going to be rolling out.
Mhm. So I can think when we started really like simple, like we made a channel on Teams and we told everybody, hey, this is the, like, we just communicate. Hey, this is this new channel. We want everybody to start telling who's doing good things and thanking people. And then I start thanking people on there. And then sometimes I ask other team members who I can trust, hey, can you thank someone on that channel tomorrow? Because I want it to catch on, right? We
Mhm.
get, we get buy-in that way. And and then I think again with when we're launching new initiatives, it really is just communication. We keep communication very basic, but we always tell people what's going on, what we're going to be doing. So like um we launched this thing where we have a coffee cart the first Wednesday of every month. So we make announcements, we tell people. I'm not sure if I'm getting to what you're asking. I mean, I think it's just like we communicate the rollout
Yeah.
and do it.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. So, like,
Yeah.
is there the way that you're communicating it? I mean, it's probably your typical channels, but just sort of like what process goes into drafting the
Okay.
communication, making sure it's the right message. What's
Yeah.
the kind of the way you approach that, and with what teams maybe?
So we have a general teams channel that all of our communication goes through, but what I hinted to before but maybe didn't say clearly is I also have like insiders helping me. So I have usually recruited a group of people that are going to help me with the initiative. So like sometimes we'll roll out a scavenger hunt, right? And we'll have
Mhm.
people take a picture like at this outside location because we think recognition is also belonging. So it doesn't have to just be straight recognition, it can be other kinds of engagement. But then I have a few people I know that are gonna be the first few people to post the picture of the scavenger hunt. So, like, I make it safe enough to do it by having other people start in the beginning. So, it's drafting, it's having some insiders that are going to be, like, early adopters, and then a lot of it is me reaching out to people. Like, I still reach out to people and just say, "Hey, have you thought about doing the scavenger hunt?" Or, um, I recruit people to help. That's the other thing I do is we do a lot of events like March Madness and fantasy football and volleyball, and I always recruit people to lead those activities. So
Mhm.
it's getting people to buy in because their teammates are leading the sort of belonging recognition activities. So that's another part of it is just recruiting volunteers. Does
Yeah,
that make
building the
sense?
champions that you
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and I'm very similar if I'm going to be doing like a marketing campaign, let's say, right? I'll get some internal champions to help me kind of communicate that. One of the things that I'll sometimes try to do too, especially if I'm trying to like think of a new approach to something, is I'll find someone who maybe would kind of come across more as a curmudgeon that like is typically kind of like a guess, and I'll kind of just run it by them ahead of time and be like, hey, like, what do you think of this? Take their feedback, adjust it, and then when I roll it out, I can say, hey, did you know like this person's kind of into it, and the people are like, whoa, like if
Yes.
that person's into it, maybe it is something I
Absolutely.
want to get involved in.
Absolutely. And I will say that it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Like, we do some things that cost money, but we do a whole lot of free things or things that cost under $100. Like, even when we send gifts when someone has a baby, it's $200, which may be a lot for some small companies, but it's not Google. Like, I'm not sending like a $900 bassinet, right? I'm sending baby outfits. Like,
Mhm.
if companies don't have a huge budget, it really doesn't. Money is nice and it helps, but there are so many free or affordable things that you can do for recognition too. Like when we play fantasy football, there's no charge to have a fantasy football league. And then we do prizes that cost like $300. Like there's just a lot of things you can do that don't take a lot of money. I just wanted to get
Yeah.
that out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important point. And I mean, again, that goes back to the whole thing of like words of affirmation is
Hmm.
it's really just on you to kind of encourage the folks to be able to do that. And as we've seen, like it really does mean a lot. Um, this is a good question here. So how does CEO consistently recognize positive behavior results? Because the person asking the question says that we've really struggled with complaints of sort of favoritism or some more complimentary managers. So how do you make it consistent?
I'm going to tell you that we still get that complaint even though we work so hard. So our CEO recognizes people. We recognize people at town halls, which are just about every other month. And because I want to be honest about this not being perfect. So we recognize different team members, different positions, different locations. Like we work so hard not to play favorites. And still on Office Vibes, someone will say, well, you only recognize these teams. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's not even true. Or so and so recognizes everyone. So I will say that is a challenge. The
Mm.
way we try to get around it is always picking different people, different locations, different positions, different people to recognize. But I just want to tell you, I have a feeling it's human nature that even if you do all of that, someone is going to complain, which I've decided to ignore.
Yeah. There's certain things you can do all you, but I think you raise a really good point, right? Is as long as you're approaching it with sort of intentionality, like you're really trying to make a point to do that, and you're consciously approaching these in that kind of way. I think that's really good, really helpful. I think for now, oh, maybe we've got one more question that's coming in. Oh, this is a great question.
Mm.
How can you recognize senior directors or the leadership team?
That's a great point and something I have not done very much. My God, like that's actually really great. That's a good question because the truth is I don't think they get that I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I recognize them at all." I should. That's a great question. I would say probably the same kind of things. I would say, like, if I was gonna be creative, it might be nice to have team members record some thoughts, like, write down some positive thoughts and give it to them, or I could say to team members, "Hey, it's so and so's birthday, let's write some messages," or maybe I just need to observe them doing great things and write to them about it. But
Hmm.
that's a really great point. I will be honest, my attention has not very often been on the senior leadership team.
Yeah, yeah. An
It's a
interesting kind
really
of thing to
great
approach.
question.
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
great. Okay, so with that, I think we're wrapped up with the questions. So, Mary Jo, just first off, thank you so much for joining us, providing your
Thank
insights,
you.
your expertise, and I'd love to give you just sort of a final word on recognition and what folks should be looking out for, and maybe things that they can start to think about in the week ahead to implement.
Um, I guess I would just say that whenever you get started, it can be really small. The key is just to get started. So you don't have to do everything at once and it doesn't have to be perfect. Like you could even start with that once a week, you're going to write to two or three people on your team and just say, hey, I heard that you're doing great things, or that you're going to have a channel where people say thank you to each other. Like it doesn't have to be everything and it doesn't have to be complicated, but the difference it makes is incredible. I truly believe it's our strongest retention tactic, which is letting our people know how much they mean to us every single day.
That's great. Well, Mary Jo, thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate all of your insights.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.